I had been raising the Alpha King's son for 2 years before he asked me my name. He asked it absently, the way a man asks the time, while the boy on his hip was hauling at his collar and demanding to be put down. I was kneeling by the hearth, banking the fire for the night. I did not stand. I did not turn fully around. I gave him the name I had been using since I came back to this fortress, and I kept my face toward the embers, because he had not looked at me directly in the 714 days I had been counting. He said the name back once, as if testing it for weight. Then the boy bit his ear, and the matter was over. I waited until the door closed behind them before I let myself breathe. My name in this fortress was Wren, the name he had asked for, half listening. The name I had chosen because it was small and brown and easy to overlook, and because it was, in fact, mine. I was 23 years old. I had been a woman grown by every law of this pack for 5 years. I was the 5th maid assigned to the royal nursery, the one no one remembered hiring, the one who had stayed when the others left. I was also the woman the Alpha King had rejected at the moon ceremony 2 years ago in front of his court, before he was a king at all. He did not know that. His wolf did. That, I had learned, was the part nobody told you about rejection. The man could forget your face. The wolf never did. The boy was called Bram. He was 2 years and 3 months old, dark-haired like his father, grey-eyed like his mother had been before she died bringing him into the world. He had been 4 months old when I first slipped into this fortress, wearing a borrowed apron and a story about being sent up from the lower kitchens. I had meant to stay a week. I had meant only to see him once. He had reached for me from his cradle. He had not stopped reaching for me since. I was not his mother. His mother had been a noblewoman called Astrid, married to Halvar in the bleak season after I disappeared, and dead before the next thaw. I had never met her. I owed her the only piece of him she had been allowed to make, but Bram had decided I was his, in the way small wolves decide things, with their whole bodies and no negotiation. And I had let him. I had told myself I would leave when he could speak my name. He had said my name at 13 months. I had not gone. Tonight, after Halvar carried him down to be put to bed in the king's chambers, as he sometimes did when the boy refused the nursery, I stayed by the fire longer than I needed to. I pressed my palm flat against the stone of the hearth and felt the heat sink into me. The scar on my sternum, the one I had worn since the night he said the words, ached the way it always ached when he had been close. A rejected mate bond does not heal. It only learns to be quiet. I told myself I had learned to be quiet too. I told myself I had not come back for him. Both of those things were almost true. The next morning, the council convened in the great hall, and I was carrying a basket of clean linens up the back stair when I heard Lady Sigrun's voice cut through the stone. "The boy needs a mother, Your Grace, not a kitchen woman." I stopped on the landing. I should not have. A maid heard nothing in this fortress and remembered less. But Sigrun's voice was the kind of voice that made you stop, the way a horn at midnight makes you stop, and I leaned my shoulder against the wall and listened. "He has a nurse," Halvar said. "He has 5 nurses, and prefers the one who cannot read. Your Grace, My father has waited 2 years for an answer. Your father has waited 2 years for me to bury my wife properly. He may wait 2 more. It has been 2 years. A pause. I knew that pause. I had heard it across a different hall on a colder night, when he had stood in front of the elders of 2 packs and told them I was a fraud sent to weaken him. The pause was him deciding what he could not say in front of witnesses. "Lady Sigrun," he said, in the voice that meant the conversation was finished, "I will give my son a Luna when his Luna presents herself. Until then, I trust the women in my nursery to know more about raising him than my council does." The basket was heavy. I lifted it and walked on. I did not let myself smile until I was 3 corridors away. The wolf in him had defended me without him knowing it. Again. I should have left then. I should have left 100 times. I cannot explain to you why I did not, except to say that Bram had a fever the next afternoon, and when I went into the nursery, Halvar was already there, sitting on the floor in his ceremonial blacks, with the boy on his chest, the way no king of the Iron Reach had ever sat on any floor. He looked up. He saw a maid. He nodded once, the way a man nods at a useful object, and went back to murmuring nonsense into his son's hair. I crossed the room and put my hand on Bram's forehead. The boy turned his face into my wrist and sighed. Halvar stilled. Stillness in him was a thing you noticed. He was a large man, broad through the shoulder, dark as the forest his fortress had been carved out of, and when he stopped moving, the room stopped with him. I had once watched him stand at the edge of a frozen river for an entire afternoon, deciding whether to cross. I had been 17 and stupid in love, and I'd thought he was the most beautiful thing I would ever see. I had been right about the second part. He said slowly, "He settles for you." "He settles for everyone, my lord. He is a friendly child." "He does not settle for me." I did not look at his face. I kept my hand on Bram's forehead and counted the seconds until I could leave. "He settles for you sometimes, my lord." "When he is asleep." "That is a victory, my lord. Take it." I heard him breathe out, once, slow. The breath of a man who had not known the conversation would have a punchline. I kept my eyes on the boy. Bram had the small, unfair gift of his mother's greyness around his eyes, and the rest of him was Halvar's, the heavy hair, the stubborn shape of the mouth, the faint frown he wore even sleeping. I had known the frown for 2 years. I had known the man it came from for longer than that. "You speak plainly," he said after a moment. "I have not been taught otherwise, my lord." "Most of my household has been taught otherwise." "Most of your household, my lord, is not in charge of a sick child at midnight." He made a sound that was not quite a laugh. It was the shape a laugh makes before a man has decided whether to allow it. I noted it. I noted everything. There was a long silence. I felt his attention move across the side of my face and stop there. I had felt that attention before, 2 years and a lifetime ago, and I had walked toward it then. I did not walk toward it now. I withdrew my hand and stepped back and bowed and went to fetch a cool cloth. When I came back, he was watching the fire instead of me. "What was your name again?" he said.
"Wren, my lord."
"Wren," he said. He said it the way he had said it the night before, testing, as if it almost fit something. I did not breathe until he had stood up, handed me his sleeping son, and left the nursery without looking at me. I had been back in the fortress for 210 days when I first found the carving. It was in the third drawer of the writing desk in the King's Solar, where I had been sent to dust because 3 other maids had refused after he shouted at one of them. He was riding the borders. The room was empty. I was alone with his books and his maps and the smell of him, which was pine and iron, and something colder I had never been able to name. The drawer stuck. I worked it open. Inside there were unsigned letters which I did not read, and a folded strip of dark cloth which I did not unfold, and at the back, wrapped in a piece of soft leather, a small wooden carving the size of my thumb. It was a bird. It was a wren. I sat down on the floor of the King's Solar with my apron full of dust and held the carving in the palm of my hand and made a sound I had not made in 2 years. He had carved it. The marks of his knife were still in the wood. I could see where his hand had hesitated at the curve of the head, where he had cut deeper than he meant to, and softened the line with his thumb. It was clumsy, and it was tender, and it was unmistakably the thing a man makes when he is trying to remember a face. He did not know what he was remembering. I knew. I sat on the floor, and I cried. Very quietly. The way you cry when you have been a maid for 2 years and have learned that grief makes no sound the household will hear. Then I wrapped the bird back in its leather and put it back in the drawer and closed it and finished the dusting and went back to the nursery and gave Bram his supper and sang him to sleep with a song my mother had sung me in a voice that did not shake. That night I knew 2 things I had not known in the morning. The first was that Halvar of the Iron Reach had been mourning me without knowing my name for 2 years in the privacy of a desk drawer. The second was that I was going to have to choose, and soon, what to do with that information. If you have stayed with me this long, stay a little further. What happens next is the part I am still not sure I lived through. Tell me, before it gets harder, where you are listening from tonight. And if her voice is the kind of voice you want at the end of a long day, follow her home. The choice was made for me in the end, the way most of mine have been. 2 days later, Lady Sigrun came up to the nursery herself. She did this rarely. She did this never, in fact. The nursery was beneath her, and Bram was beneath her, until he was old enough to be useful, and I was so far beneath her, I doubt she had ever taken in my face. She came up carrying a small silver dish of honeyed plums, and she came up smiling, and the moment she set the dish down on the table by the cradle, I knew. I had been raised in a healer's house. I knew the look of food that had been touched. The plums were too dark at the pits. The honey had been heated and cooled. There was the faintest greenish cast at the edges of the cut fruit that my mother had taught me, when I was 8 years old, meant cold bane root, which is sweet to the tongue and stops a child's heart by morning. Lady Sigrun knelt down by the cradle, beautiful and gold-haired and smelling of expensive smoke, and held out a plum to my boy. I moved before I thought. I knocked the dish off the table. Plums skidded across the stone. Sigrun rose to her full height, which was considerable, and her eyes went the colour of a winter sky. "You clumsy little—"
"They were spoiled, my lady."
"They were a gift to the prince."
"They were spoiled, my lady. I would not let any child eat them, not even mine."
The word slipped. I heard it slip. I did not take it back. She heard it too. I watched her catalogue it, the way a hawk catalogues a movement in the grass. She took a step toward me. I did not step back. I had 3 inches and 10 years of difference, and a title between us, and I did not step back. "You overreach, Maid."
"I serve the prince, my lady."
"You serve at the king's pleasure, and the king," she said very softly, "will not be pleased when he hears how a kitchen woman spoke to a guest of his house." She left. The plums lay on the floor between us. Bram, who had slept through the whole exchange, made a small sound in his cradle and went on sleeping. I picked up every plum. I wrapped them in a clean cloth. I put them on the highest shelf of the nursery cupboard, where no child would reach. I did not tell anyone that night. I sat by the cradle until the moon was through the window, and I thought about the fact that I had 2 choices left, and both of them required me to stop being a maid. In the morning, I went to find the king. He was in the practice yard in his linen training tunic despite the cold, working through forms with a wooden sword. There were 6 men around him. None of them were close enough to hear. I waited at the gate, hands folded into my apron, until he saw me. He did not see me at first. Then his wolf did. I watched it happen. I watched the moment when his shoulders shifted, fractionally, the way a wolf's shoulders shift when something familiar passes downwind. I watched his head come up. I watched his eyes find the gate and find me. He stopped his form mid-strike. The men around him stopped too, because the king had stopped, and a silence opened up in the yard, the way silences open up when something has gone wrong. He walked over. He stopped 3 paces from me, which was about a pace closer than was proper for a king and a maid, and he said, "Wren."
"My lord?"
"You are not in the nursery."
"No, my lord."
"Why?" I had not rehearsed it. I told him about the plums. I told him about the coldbane root, and the way my mother had taught me to see it. I told him that Lady Sigrun had brought them as a gift, and that I had refused to let his son eat them. I did not tell him I had called Bram mine. I did not tell him about the carving. He listened without moving. When I was finished, he turned his head, very slightly, and one of the men behind him went running for the captain of the guard. He looked back at me. "Where are the plums?"
"In the nursery cupboard, top shelf, wrapped."
"You did not tell anyone last night."
"No, my lord. I wanted to tell you."
"Why?"
I almost laughed. It would have been the wrong kind of laugh. I held it back. "Because she is going to say I lied, my lord, and I wanted you to hear it from me first." He looked at me for a long moment. He was looking at me, properly, for the first time in 2 years. I did not let my face do anything. I had practiced that face in 210 mornings of mirror.
"You are not afraid of her," he said.
No, my lord.
You are not afraid of me either?
No, my lord.
He took a breath. He let it out slowly. That is unusual, Wren.
Yes, my lord. I have been told.
Something flickered at the corner of his mouth. It was not a smile. It was the place a smile might have been, on a man who had forgotten how to put one there. He turned away from me before it could become anything more, and he said, over his shoulder, in the voice that was law in the Iron Reach, "You will stay in the nursery. You will not leave my son's side until I say otherwise. You will eat from the same dishes he eats from, and you will sleep in the room with him, and if Lady Sigrun crosses that threshold again, you will send for me and not for the guard. Do you understand?"
Yes, my lord.
Good.
He walked back to his forms. I went back to the nursery. I sat down on the floor by the cradle, and I put my hand on my chest, where the rejection scar was, and I felt it ache. It had not ached like that since the night he had said the words. He had defended me. He had moved his entire household to keep me near his son. He had called me Wren, as if the name had a shape now. He still did not know who I was. The trial of Lady Sigrun was held in the great hall 3 days later, after the captain's men had searched her chambers and found a small, stoppered vial in the lining of a riding cloak, and after the cook had identified the honey she had taken from the kitchen, and after a healer not under her father's protection had tested the plums and named the poison. Sigrun did not deny it. She did, instead, a thing I had not expected. She pointed at me, where I stood at the back of the hall holding Bram on my hip, and she said, very clearly, in front of the king and the council and 300 witnesses, "That woman is not a maid. That woman is the rejected mate your grace turned away at the moon ceremony of Black Pine. I would know her face anywhere. I was there." The hall went still. I felt the king go still at the dais. I felt his wolf go still inside him. I felt 300 faces turn toward me, and I felt Bram in my arms turn his small face into my throat and close his fist in my hair, and I held him, and I did not move. Halvar said, "Bring her forward." I walked forward. The hall was very long and very quiet, and I had to walk all of it. Bram weighed nothing. Bram weighed everything. At the foot of the dais I stopped, and I lifted my eyes, and I looked at the Alpha King of the Iron Reach for the first time in 2 years and 3 months, and I let him look at me. I watched it happen on his face. I watched the moment his wolf, who had known since the first night, was finally allowed to tell the man. He did not stand up. He did not cry out. He did not do any of the things a lesser man would have done. He went absolutely white, the way iron goes white in a forge before it bends, and he gripped the arms of the wolf throne so hard the wood made a sound. And he said, in a voice that did not belong to a king, "What is your name?" "You know my name, my lord." "Say it." "Mira," I said, "of Black Pine, the healer's daughter, the one you sent away." A sound went through the court. It was not a kind sound. Sigrun was smiling, which was a mistake on her part, because she had just told a roomful of wolves
that their king had rejected his fated mate. And the people of the Iron Reach are many things, but they are not forgiving of waste. Halvar stood up. He came down the dais. He stopped 2 paces from me, which was 1 pace closer than was proper, and he said, low, "Why are you holding my son?" "Because he reached for me, my lord, the night I came back, and I have not been able to put him down since." "How long?" "2 years, my lord, almost." He closed his eyes. He was a tall man, and a broad man, and a king, and he closed his eyes in front of his court, like a man who had taken a wound and was waiting for the worst of it to pass. When he opened them again, he was looking at me, only at me, and there was no court, and no Sigrun, and no throne, and no 2 years between us. There was only the look of a man who had been carving a wren in the dark, and had not known why. "I rejected you," he said. "Yes, my lord." "I was wrong." "Yes, my lord." "I have been wrong every day since." "I know, my lord." He reached, slowly, and put his hand against the side of my face. It was the first time he had touched me in 2 years and 3 months. The scar on my sternum lit up like a struck match, like cold driven into bone, like a winter that had been waiting to break. I did not flinch. I had endured worse things than this. I had endured being unrecognized in his house for 714 days. "It will resist," I said quietly. "The rejection. If you try to take it back, it will fight you." "I know. It will hurt me." "I know. Do it anyway." He did. I will not describe the kiss. I will tell you instead that it tasted of 2 years of carved wood and unsigned letters. I will tell you that the cold from the rejection scar drove up into my throat and tried to lock my jaw, and I bit down on it and let him have what he was taking back. I will tell you that Bram, in my arms, made a small, surprised sound, and then put his free hand on his father's cheek, as if to say, "Finally, you noticed." The frost broke in me. I felt it break. I felt the seam in my chest where the bond had been severed knit itself back together with a heat that was not gentle, that took something from me, that left me shaking against him when he drew back. He held me up. He kept his hand at the side of my face. He looked over my shoulder at his court, his pup still in my arms, and he said, in a voice that filled the hall, "This is my mate. This is the Luna of the Iron Reach. This is the woman who has been raising my son since he was 4 months old, and no one in this hall noticed, because no one in this hall was looking. I rejected her. I was a young man and a stupid one, and I was lied to about her by men I trusted, and I rejected her in front of you. And she walked away from me with a wound on her body that has not healed in 2 years. She came back. She came back, and she did not come back for me. She came back for him." He did not look at me when he said the last part. He looked at his son. Bram, with the unerring timing of children, leaned out of my arms and reached for his father. The hall did something I had never heard a great hall do. It made a soft sound, 300 wolves at once. The sound a pack makes when it acknowledges what it has been refusing to see. Halvar took his son. He held him in the crook of one arm. He kept his other hand at the side of my face. He looked at Lady Sigrun, who was no longer smiling. "Take her," he said to the captain. "Strip her name. Send her father word that the betrothal he believed himself to have negotiated does not exist, has never existed, and will not be discussed in this house again. If he objects, he may bring it up with my Luna." Sigrun was taken. The hall emptied in stages. The councillors did not meet my eyes. The councillors will learn to meet my eyes. I had been a maid in this fortress for 2 years. I knew where they kept their secrets. When the hall was finally empty, Halvar sat down on the bottom step of the dais with his son on his knee and looked up at me. "Mira." "Yes?" "I have a carving in my desk." "I know." "You found it?" "Months ago." "Why did you not tell me then?" I thought about it. I thought about the 714 mornings and the boy who had reached for me from the cradle, and the way his father had said the wrong name to me 100 times without knowing it was the wrong name, and the way the wolf in him had defended me to his counsel without ever once telling the man what he was defending. "You were not ready, my lord." "And now?" "Now you carved the bird, my lord. Now you know what it is for." He laughed. It was a rough sound, the sound of a thing that had not been used in a long while, and Bram looked up at his father in genuine astonishment, as if he had never heard the noise before. He had not. I doubted anyone in this fortress had heard it in 2 years. I sat down on the step beside them. Bram crawled across his father's lap into mine and put his head on my shoulder, and went, with the pragmatism of small wolves, immediately to sleep. Halvar watched him go. "He chose you the moment you came back," he said. "Yes. His wolf knew. Yes. Mine knew too. Yes, my lord. Yours has been telling me for 2 years. You were just slow." He looked at me. "You called him yours," he said. "In the nursery, the day with the plums." "I did." "He is yours." "Yes, my lord." "And you are mine." I looked at him. The king of the Iron Reach, the man who had rejected me in front of 2 packs and a council, and the moon. And I considered, with all the dryness I had earned in 2 years of being unseen, the question of whether he had quite enough information yet to be making that statement. "I am the Luna of the Iron Reach," I said. "I am the woman who raised your son. We will see, my lord, about the rest." He smiled. It was a real smile, and it was for me. And I had not seen it on his face since I was 17. "Yes, Luna," he said. "We will see." It is 6 months later as I tell you this. It is autumn. The trees on the ridge above the fortress have gone gold, and the kitchens smell of pressed apples, and Bram is 3 years old and has started calling me by a name that is not Wren and is not Mira, but is, in the private logic of small children, simply mine. The wolf throne has a second seat now. It is smaller and made of pale wood, and it is mine. The councillors have learned, with varying degrees of grace, to meet my eyes. 2 of them resigned in the first month. A third tried to write to a rival pack, and was found out by the same captain who had searched Sigrun's chambers. He is no longer at court. The fortress is quieter than it has been in my time here, and the kitchens like me, and the stable boys do not, and the rest of the household is still deciding. Lady Sigrun is in a stone tower on the eastern coast, in the keeping of an aunt of mine, who does not believe in honeyed plums. Her father has not written. We did not expect him to. Halvar sleeps less well than he did before. He says it is because he has more to lose now. I tell him it is because the boy kicks. He tells me that I am a difficult woman. I tell him that he is slow. The carving sits on my side of the bed now. I keep it where I can see it in the morning. Tell me, if you have stayed with me all the way to the end, did you see it coming? The moment in the great hall, the way his face went, the way the boy reached. Tell me which part you replayed. Tell me where you were sitting when I called myself his. And if her voice has been good company tonight, if you would like to hear the next one, and the one after, stay with us. Follow her home. There are more of us than you know. Women who walked away and came back wearing different names. And we are only just beginning to tell you what happened next.